It's December! Hello crafters, it's Amanda here. As you saw from the title and from the thumbnail, today we are going to be making an adorable mason jar snowman. So we're going to do a quick rundown on materials and jump right into this project. So obviously, since we're doing a mason jar project, you'll need a mason jar. You will also want a lid. I would recommend a lid that's like one piece. Instead of the kind that are flat and have the additional ring, I would recommend trying to get a lid that's already just one solid piece. We are going to need a little cup, so kind of like a little Dixie cup. This one here that I'm using is a 3-ounce cup. This one's plastic, but I would actually recommend using one of these ones that are more the paper, just because this one has some ridges and things on the edge, but it's not a big deal. It'll still turn out fine. But 3-ounce, paper's better than plastic, but plastic will still work. Little bathroom cup. We will need some paint. You will need black and orange for the snowman's face. I got these at Walmart. They're like the apple barrel ones, and they're either 59 cents or 99 cents a piece. I can't remember which. And then I chose to make my scarf out of red. You could also optionally, instead of making your scarf out of paint, you could get some washi tape and just quickly zip that around there. But you can go paint or the washi tape, totally up to you. We will need some glue. I'm using crazy glue for this part, and this is to glue the top of our hat to the lid of our jar. You'll also need scissors for cutting the lid cup down a little smaller. Since we're using paint, obviously a paintbrush. And then we're going to give it this frosted look. So to do this, we are going to be using Epsom salt. Got a bag here. We will be using Epsom salt, and we're going to be using glue. Now, as far as glue goes, what kind, you don't want to use the super glue. The super glue is just for the hat. But you can either use Mod Podge and dilute it with a little bit of water, some Elmer's glue and dilute it with a little bit of water, or you can use what I'm using, and I'm using tacky glue, and yes, I'm going to dilute this with a little bit of water. But that's the material list. Let's jump into this project. The first thing we're going to do with this project is we're going to give this jar the frosty look like this jar has. So I've got a little paper cup here that I'm going to do my mixing in. And I've got a little bit of water, and I want to get my glue. Again, you can use any of the 3 kinds of glue that I mentioned, whether it's Mod Podge, Elmer's, or tacky glue. Doesn't really matter, but the amount of water you put in will change depending on what kind of glue you use. So we're going to first fill it up with some glue, and then we're going to slowly add water. As far as how much glue you need, I would say start with less versus more because it will go further than you think it will. But you will need enough to coat the entire inside of the jar. Alright, so I've got a bit of glue in there. I'm going to add just a little bit of water. And keep in mind that you can always add more water, so it's better to start with adding less water than more. I'm going to stir this up. And the reason why is I want my mixture to be runny enough to coat the inside of my jar. So there's a little bit of a guessing game with how much to use, but it's better to start with less water versus more, because the more water you add just means it's going to take longer to dry. And your salt and you'll need to use more salt because your salt will have to absorb all this liquid. So I'm going to angle my jar sideways and start pouring my mixture in here, just kind of turning. And I'll probably need to make more of my mixture. As you can see, it didn't go super far, so I'm gonna make a little bit more. Again, be conservative in how much water you use. And just kind of keep it angled, we'll pour it in here. So as you can see, it's not coating the entire inside. I do have some that's kind of still running there, so I'm just going to turn this sideways and try to coat the sides of my jar as best I can before I add the salt in. And this will just help us get a more even coat, and it will stop the salt from clumping as much. Alright, so we're going to start like this. We can always add more as we go. Now, I would recommend that before you even open your bag that you make sure it's really soft. I had some really big hard chunks, so I'm just kind of squeezing the bag to break it up, because you don't want to add chunks of salt because it just won't spread as evenly and nicely as you want it to. So if your bag like mine is clumpy, you want to break those up. Now I had a bunch of excess salt from my last jar, so I'm actually going to start using this, but I may still need to add more because this is a little bit wet from glue, and you need to have enough to kind of absorb all that so it'll stick to the side. So I'm going to dump this in here. And as you can see, this is really clumpy. So when you start with fresh glue, it should not be this clumpy. So if your glue was already dry, it would not clump like this. Mine's clumpy just because it's left over and had a little bit of glue in it from last time. But once I have my salt in the jar, I'm going to hold it sideways and start shaking it. And kind of shake it up and down to spread the salt around the inside of the jar. Again, if yours is clumping really badly, you can dump out the clumpy stuff and add more dry salt, and it will stick to the sides better, which is what I need to do for this one. So get some of this and dump it in my jar. And turn it sideways, just kind of shake it around to start coating the side. You can see it's starting to coat the sides really nicely. Now as you can see, I have some sections here that didn't really have glue, so the salt isn't sticking to it, so I'm going to make a little bit more of my mixture. Now that I have a little bit more ready, I'm going to do something different this time. I'm actually going to paint it inside in the areas that don't have much salt. So I'm going to paint it in all these gaps along here, and I'm also going to paint the inside rim, so all along in here. Get all the inside of this rim here. I'm actually going to just pour this last little bit of the mixture in here to really coat the inside of my jar. Again, kind of twirl it around through here. I've still got a little bit of salt left in there that's dry. I'm going to add a little bit more salt. So that I'll have enough dry salt to coat the top up here and fill in those gaps. And this time, I'm going to put the lid on it. I'm going to dump the whole thing upside down. I'm going to coat this whole section up top. Just shake my salt there so you can see it filling in really nice. Shake my salt and fill in these gaps. If your salt gets really clumpy and it's not sticking to the sides well, that means you need to add more salt or else have put in less glue to start with. So I'm going to make sure I get this inner rim all the way up in the neck of the bottle coated. So once you are happy with how coated your jar is with the salt, then it's time to move on to the painting. Now before we can actually get to our painting, we need to assemble our hat so that way we can paint it. So to do this, I've got my little Dixie cup, and basically I'm going to glue it on top. Now if I glue it on like that, that's a really tall hat and it doesn't have a very wide brim. So I'm going to come up about halfway and cut this bottom section off, so that way it'll be on top a little more like that. This is just more of a preference thing, how much you cut off, so there's not really a science to it. Just trim off as much as you want. And mine split, so I'm gonna have to do this again. This is also why it's better to use the paper ones instead of the plastic ones. And this is the difference in the edges that I was talking about. So I'm gonna cut a second one and then I'll show you what to do with it. There we go, that's better. So I'm gonna glue this to the center. And I'm going to use super glue. You can use whatever kind of glue you want. I'm using super glue just because that'll be a little bit faster. So while we let that finish drying, we're going to start painting our jar. Quick pro tip, we are going to need to squeeze our paint onto something, so you can use the scraps from the cup as little paint trays. So I'm going to cut this into smaller sections, and I'll be able to use these little sections as my paint trays. So decide which side of the jar you're going to paint on. I'm going to paint on this side because this side on the back side has the mason jar pattern. Another thing you may want to do is screw the hat on. Just don't touch the super glue if you use super glue, but screw the hat on so that way you can see about how big it's going to look and so you can figure out how far up or down you want to make your face. And I'm just going to squeeze out a little bit of my black paint and paint a face on here. And I recommend that you start making everything smaller than you think you want it to be because it's a lot easier to go bigger than it is to take the paint off and go smaller. Now that I've got the eyes and the mouth, I'm going to do some buttons. Now make sure you leave enough space for the scarf to go here. Alright, he looks a little silly right now, so let's give him a nose. Now with these lighter colors, we'll probably need to do a couple coats because they won't show up as clearly as the black does. while we let the nose dry before we do the second coat, we will add the scarf. Again, you can either use paint or you can just use some washi tape in red. I'm gonna use paint, but the washi tape would be a really quick method to use. Here's a tip for the scarf. So get some paint on your brush, hold your hand still, touch it to the jar, and then just spin the jar around. And this will give a nice clean edge. So you need to keep getting more paint, but just hold it at that same height, and then twist the jar. Again, we'll need to do a couple layers with the red so it really shows up well, but this is just a tip to get a nice even height all the way around. So now I've got my rough edge. I'll do another layer down lower to get the bottom of my scarf, and then I'll fill in the gaps. And of course I'll need to do another layer to get it to show up really well. I'm also going to paint the little tail ends of the scarf on my snowman. So now that we're done painting the face on our snowman, the last thing to do is to paint the hat. So this is pretty straightforward. Just get your black paint and paint the hat. Alrighty, I have finished painting my snowman. Now you may have noticed on yours and you might notice it on mine, but in a couple spots I got some of the paint on the glass jar. That's okay. I'm gonna let this dry, and once it's dry, because it's acrylic paint, it's going to be really easy to clean off. I'm just gonna unscrew the lid and use a little bit of water and just kind of rub it off, and any paint that is on the jar will come right off. Super easy with just a little bit of water and a little bit of scrubbing. So we're gonna set this off to dry, and then our project will be ready to use for decorating. So here are my finished snowmen. I'm going to take the caps off of both of them so that way the glue inside can dry out a little bit more. You definitely want to let what's inside dry out all the way. But now they're assembled, and once they finish drying on the inside, they're ready to be placed wherever I want to use them for decorations. I'll also give you a bonus idea. With this snowman, it would be really pretty if once the inside is dry, if you get one of those little tea lights that are battery operated and you turn it on and put it inside here, that will look super cute, shining through the like frosty coating of the Epsom salt. So that'd be a really cute way to just add a little, more character, turn your little snowman into a lamp. But it's a super simple craft, and I love it because I feel like mason jars are always in season, and it's really simple to throw together. I'd love to know what you guys think about this project, so drop those comments down below. And as always, you're probably sick of me saying it, but it does help me and it means so much. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up because that lets me know that you like the video. And also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I'm over 1,300 subs. Thank you all so much. I'm super excited how my channel's been growing, and I couldn't do it without your support. So thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope you have an awesome week. Happy crafting. Bye! So it's no secret that I love Christmas, and we're finally in December. I'm super excited about this. I've got one more day of class, and then it's finals, and then I'm on Christmas break. But the thing is, I tend to forget because I associate Christmas with winter. I kind of forget that we've got another 20 so days of fall, and because of that, I wanted to do an appreciation moment for this little pumpkin that has not molded, has not rotted, and is still in amazing shape.